All right, and we are live. Go ahead, Alicia.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
All right, I'll do roll call. Alicia Neth,
Here.
Callie Maxfield,
Here.
Kelly Kabilski is absent with prior notice. Bruce Kramer,
Here.
Jason Hoyt is absent with prior notice. Carrick Brown,
Here.
Steve Langley,
Here.
Carol Noker,
Here.
and Erica Winston.
Here.
Fantastic, thank you all. Our next item is the minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm using someone else's laptop, so I was trying to get to the agenda.
You're good. She may be frozen. So if we continue, Bruce, do you want to take over until Alicia comes back?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm looking for a motion on the minutes from before.
I move that we approve.
Do I have a
Second.
It looks like Carrick got that second.
Any questions or any updates on the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, we'll move on from the minutes.
Thank you, Bruce. Reports, Chamber of Commerce. Erica, you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Erica Winston. I'm going to be the interim executive director, at least for now. I've been in Smithfield for 18 years, almost 19 years, and I've been with the chamber for about 3 years now. Our membership looks, from what I can tell, it looks like we've got about 180 members as of right now. And our next event is going to be March 1st for the crawfish boil at the American Legion.
Still planning on the monthly meeting, February 9th.
Yes.
Okay. I'm presenting, so I just wanted to make sure it,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Erica. School district, Carol.
Okay, I do have a few things to report. Right now, we are celebrating state assessments just came out of 25 districts in the metro. We are in the top 4 in math and in all areas that they look at. In ELA, we're in the top 10 in at least 5 different categories. So celebrating, and to me, I'm just amazed that even though we had a pandemic going on, we improved our scores, especially in math, really just knocked it out of the park. So we're doing some really good things. Our ACT scores are 5th in the metro. And so continuing to do well in those areas. I know Todd's going to be doing a video report, and that'll come out, I think, sometime later this week. As far as what I am working on, I have some exciting things to share. Just as far as where we are and where we are going, we are looking at what we call market value assets. And those are experiences for our students to help them connect with career paths and to help them with their future and helping them decide what they want to do and grow in their essential skills. And the Kauffman Foundation measures those several different categories. Starting off, our goal is that by 2030 we'll be at 100%, and that's a goal that the Kauffman Foundation is working on throughout the metro. Starting off, we're already at 72% as of last year's graduates. So 72% of our graduates graduated with at least one of these experiences, these market value assets. So we're well on our way to do really well. And our business community is a big part of that, as well as the city. So I'm celebrating that. Coming up on April 23rd, the board is looking at a possible bond issue for approximately 12 million. There are a few different things that would be included in that. The main piece would be a transportation center and / maintenance building. Currently, our busing is all done by Coulter. And so if that changes, that needs to be addressed. So that's the first piece. Also, so then to do that, we would need to take a piece of land that we are currently utilizing for some of our sports teams, football teams, soccer teams. So we would need to then, if we were to go that route and use that piece of land for that transportation hub, then we would need to make the fields at the middle school competition ready. So that would be the second piece of that. And then the third piece would be the sidewalks on campus and making them walkable and safe. If you've ever been on the Smithfield Schools campus, you really are taking your life into your own hands if you're trying to walk between the different schools. So that would be the third piece of that. We continue to extend, they call it POAC, People of All Colors, Succeed. It's a training and they work with different groups of students. We're continuing to extend that to more groups of students. And those students are also assisting with the facilitation with the middle school students as well to help again be more inclusive and help them understand some behaviors maybe that they don't know that they're have been doing. And it's actually, according to what we're looking at, it's been successful. So we're continuing on that path. And then lastly, we do have on April 5th, school board elections. We have 5 candidates for 2 seats. Sarah Lamer has decided not to run. And so we have Lynn Matthew, Whitney Carlisle, Scott Jacoby, Christopher Palmer, and Kelly Boley that are running. So that again is coming up on April 5th. And that is all that I have from the school district.
Can I ask Carol a question?
I will try to answer, sure.
The 25 districts in Kansas City that sounds like most of the metro school districts. Is that Missouri and Kansas side?
No, this I believe is in Missouri.
Missouri, okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then one other side note that you didn't bring up, does Smithfield have an ESL program?
That's a question I would have to ask. I'm not certain.
That was just curiosity on my side. I just didn't know if we had enough students that would need ESL services for us to have a program, so.
That would be a question for probably Michelle, and I can ask her that and let you know that. Okay, Steve?
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Carol. Alicia, you are up next with the Chairwinds Report.
Okay, so did you already do your city report, Anna?
Nope, I will do that next.
Okay, so other than what you will probably touch on, most of my updates, as always, are Main Street related. Currently, like I said earlier, I'm in Jeff City with 2 of our Main Street board members and Alyssa, our executive director. Today, we met with Senator Dan Hageman and Representative Josh Hurlburt to discuss Missouri Main Street and, of course, specifically Smithville. It was great to meet with them and talk about how important our downtown is, all downtowns, the historic aspect. Josh took a lot of time giving us a tour of the Capitol. He was really great. And there are a lot of great things in the works. We are going to, what is the conference we're going to tomorrow? It's a very long word.
Marketing, heritage, and cultural tourism.
Marketing, heritage, and cultural tourism in rural Missouri. So that's a mouthful and it's going to be really fun. We're always really energized after we go to those, talking with other main streets across the state to get their ideas for how to bring people into their town and, really ramp up everyone coming and spending time in Smithville and our small towns. Other than that, I think we've already had a few meetings for events in Smithville. I know the downtown courtyard is almost already booked up. Like there are events from April to October, at least almost every weekend. A lot of fun things happening. So I'm really excited for downtown and Smithville as a whole.
Thank you, Alicia. So for staff report, I have a very long list of things that have been happening in Smithville in the last couple of months since we last met. And then I also have a quarterly dashboard for you as well. At the end of this, I'll share my screen so you can take a look at that. So since January 1, we've issued 10 permits for housing, 1 tenant finish permit for Jimmy John's. Townhomes at 319 East Main have began construction of 8 units of the 10 total residential. Diamond Creek subdivision is nearly complete with sanitary sewer work. The water and stormwater will be beginning soon, and we anticipate early April will be when the streets go in. And that will bring 39 new single-family lots on board.
Where's Diamond Creek located?
I would not be able to give you the exact location, but I can look that up and email it to you.
Well, that's okay. I was just, I had not heard of it before, so I just wondered where it was located.
Yes, brand new subdivision going in. So we're excited about that. Eagle Ridge subdivision, which is north of the high school, recorded its plat this week, and that is bringing 43 two-family lots on board for construction. Plans are in review for 2 different styles of duplex townhomes for that subdivision. Across the road from Richardson Street Plaza is a proposed McBee's Coffee and Car Wash. I don't know if you all have seen that sign driving around town. We are still waiting for final submittals of that plan to take forward to planning and zoning and then for board review. So we are waiting on the developer for that to move forward as well. First Park Industrial has 90% of all the subdivision work completed and approved. The medical marijuana facility continues to make progress. The red iron is all up. Siding roofing is working to the west of the building. And they have a proposed completion date of May of this year. At Smithfield Marketplace, the dental office has passed all rough inspections or rough-in inspections. They only need to complete finishes to be ready for final approval. Jimmy John's has got final approval to begin construction, which they indicate will start this week. The third of the RV storage buildings is nearly complete. The owner indicates that this spring he will begin grading for the RV park that will be in front of the storage buildings. The Herzog Foundation building and the 4 cabin buildings are still under construction. There are several large infrastructure projects that have begun construction this year out at Smith's Fork Park for both water and sewer. The design work for the 144th Street Pump Station bypass will begin this spring with construction scheduled for 2023. There's a water line replacement and extension underway at First Street and Bridge. And then we've also begun having preliminary discussions with a party that has a contract on the 2 strip malls south of Casey's and all the vacant land to the east towards North Bridge Street. So those conversations are starting to happen. And then as far as streetscape work from 2018 has paid off in the downtown area. Shops on South Bridge have been rehabbed. The 2 apartments in the corner are complete. The building at the northwest corner of Bridge and Main Street was purchased and rehabbed and is now a new title company. That's that new black building, or the newly painted black building, which will bring in new residents for closing on real estate transactions. The old Wheeler building north of the 3-Link building has also been rehabbed and now has tenants. The remaining 2 historic structures north of there have been purchased, and we anticipate rehab work to begin sometime this year. And then the previous Crafters Corner building has been sold, and it's currently housing the Herzog Foundation offices and will eventually house what I believe is the Emil DeCounts. Am I correct, Alicia? Yeah. Yep, Great. That is a very long list of a lot of great things that are happening in Smithville right now. Give me a moment. I can pop up our quarterly update, and these are year end. And when I say year end, I mean the end of the city fiscal year, which is the end of October. Next month, I will bring you another quarterly, but that'll be after the first quarter of this year. So year end, residential permits, we ended up with just one less than the year prior, but we're good as far as keeping that momentum up. We are up 2 permits from the year prior for commercial permits. Special events, it looks great, but you also have to take into effect COVID was pretty rampant in 2020. So we're getting back up there with events. I know Alicia previously mentioned our courtyard is pretty much booked for this year, and it is very exciting to see those events tick back up. Sales tax, we are up 10% over 2019-2020 fiscal year, which is fantastic. And we are also up 25% over 2019-2020 fiscal year in our use tax. And remember that use tax is taxes that are on anything that you purchase online on Amazon or any online shop. Business license renewals or business licenses in general, we are up over 100 of those as well. So we're excited to keep those numbers going up. And it's exciting to see that COVID in the last couple of years didn't put a damper on any of these, which is fantastic. But any questions on those? Great. Well, next item is our action item. With us, we have Megan Miller from Gilmore and Bell. She was with us. She's been with us the last couple of meetings going over different incentives. And so she is here to answer any of your questions. But what I'd like to go through first is Chapter 100 and Chapter 353 incentives. These are the incentives that we went over during our November meeting. And in the memo to you all, the request for action, I included some examples of different parameters that you all can recommend to the Board of Aldermen. So I'd like very much like what we did with TIF at our last meeting. I would love to be able to hear your recommendations on Chapter 100 and Chapter 353 as far as what you are more likely to entertain for proposals from developers, and what would be absolute no's for you or what you would like to see. But with that, I will open up the floor. Alicia, if you want to go first, or if you want to usher us through this discussion as well, that would be great.
I'd love to hear some examples of different parameters first, if we could, please.
Yes. So on the staff report for Chapter 100, I have them listed for both Chapter 100 and 353. So different parameters that you can limit. You can limit the term for Chapter 100. The max is 25 years for both 100 and 353. So you can limit how many years you can have that as the max. For Chapter 100, I'll just go through the list. You can limit the use of Chapter 100 to only sales tax exemption on construction materials. You can limit the percentage of tax abatement. You can tie the amount of investment in job creation to the amount of tax abatement. And then also you can say that a project should include public improvements, which is something I know that we've talked about with TIF in the past as well. And Megan, please chime in if there's anything that I skipped over or missed. And of course, she is here to answer any questions if you all have any of those. For 353, again, you can limit the term, max is 25 years. And then you can also limit the percentage of tax abatement. And that is not an exhaustive list, I believe. So we can just go from there.
So I was absent for your last meeting when you discussed the TIF. And I do see that we did the limited the term to, was it 15 years? Does it make sense for us to limit these as well to that 15 years, or are they just such different beings that we would want a different number, like 20?
Yeah,
I guess I'm
here,
directing this to Megan.
I will let Megan answer that.
Chapter 100 and chapter 353 they're definitely a different beast than TIF. Especially because they don't affect sales tax revenues. They only affect property tax abatement. I think that I'm definitely putting a limiting term on there. I don't know necessarily. I think that one should be flexible. I think you should tie it more towards making sure that they are creating jobs and making sure that they are investing in the community. And then also you can even tie it to salary. So I was in Lebanon, Missouri yesterday on a chapter 100 where the company had to pay an additional payment to the taxing jurisdictions if they in any given year didn't have 50 jobs and they weren't meeting 80% of the county average wage. So they tied both of those things in. So I think I think with these cases, it's better to add factors that they either lose their abatement or they have to pay additional payments in lieu of taxes on top of what they already pay. And when they're not meeting certain standards.
If we change the timeframes, how does that put us into a better or worse competitive position with other jurisdictions?
Chapter 100s are very popular. A lot of communities don't necessarily limit these, but instead tie it to how, like the investment, right? They get longer years, more abatement if they're investing, $10 million into their building, or, less for $5 million. A lot of communities offer the sales tax exemption on construction materials. They don't necessarily, for certain projects, they'll say, well, we'll only give you sales tax exemption on construction materials. But with everything that we do, I think that in all of these policies, and I think Anna would agree with me that, there's always, these are just policies, these are just suggestions that if there's a specific project that the city's extremely excited about, they can go outside of those parameters. So, that's, if there's ever an outlier that the city really wanted, they could they could get that and they could change these.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the policies that we're working on now, it'll go into an incentive toolbox. It'll get approved by the board, but these aren't hard line. You cannot go past this many years. It's not accepted whatsoever. We'll always accept proposals. We'll talk through them. We'll negotiate. But what we're looking for here is what is the most palatable to you all as the Economic Development Committee.
Right.
I had a question on the sales tax exemption on construction materials. That's for construction materials purchased from within our jurisdiction?
Everywhere. So because with chapter 100, the city actually has title to the property. They issue their sales tax exemption certificate. So then when we do these plans, which with the chapter 100, you're required to do a plan, we generally lay out, we'll ask the company, we'll say, okay, well, how much are you intending on spending? How much, are you intending on spending on construction materials? And then we'll go through and we'll say, okay, by doing this, this is how much they're spending within the city of Smithfield. This is how much they're spending within Clay County. This is how much they're spending within the state. This is how much they're spending out of state. And then we'll go through and we'll figure what the revenue loss is to each one of those jurisdictions. So they get the sales tax exemption applies everywhere.
Okay, so they could buy it materials in Arkansas.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, that was one of my questions.
Yep.
Okay. Kind of another question. So on chapter 100, the city owns the title to the land.
Mhm.
The company builds the building and puts equipment in the building. And what happens if the company fails? Who owns the equipment in the building? The company that fails? Or does the city have a right to go after the equipment in the building?
That's a good question. I need to go back and look at we have that all covered in the events of default section. I know at the end, obviously the company has an option to purchase, and it's always a nominal amount at the end of those. But I believe if it were to, the city wouldn't be stuck with it, right? I mean, if there was a situation where, this business had failed, what would happen would be they would lose their abatement, and then, title would I need to look at the documents, but I believe title would transfer back to the company because they would lose their abatement purposes. But because the city technically doesn't have any skin in this game, the bonds aren't backed by the city's general revenue fund. Everything, the only reason why the city has title to this is because they can then provide the sales tax the property tax abatement, and then the sales tax exemption. The city has no skin in this, so they wouldn't necessarily want to retain title to those buildings that they have.
And it's probably a scenario, hopefully, that everybody's due diligence wouldn't happen, but city would end up owning a piece of land that they couldn't do anything with because somebody else is building and equipment or sitting on the property.
They would transfer it back. The city would not be stuck with it.
Okay.
I've never come across that. I mean, I haven't done this for very long, and I also don't think this has ever happened. That's happened to my boss either. So,
Yeah. Okay.
So as
Then
far
I
as
got-
parameters, oh, sorry, go ahead,
One
Steve.
more question. Yeah. So under the chapter 353, I asked Anna this question because I just couldn't think of what areas in Smithfield were blighted. And then I brought up the question about the old hospital.
Mhm.
And I mean, it looks blighted when you drive down the street by it, but I didn't know if it would fit the criteria for blighted under the definition for blighted under 353.
absolutely, it's 100% blighted in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, what I explained to Steve over email, first of all, he did ask for an update on the old hospital project. We have yet to receive a proposal, so that's why it didn't make the list. So we are still in the waiting period. So as far as blight.
I spoke with Eric, by the way,
Mhm.
and he's had some delays to no fault of the city. It's all on his side, but he said the lawyers are working diligently on it and expect something from them shortly.
Great.
Yep.
We're excited to get something in our hands. We want to get going
Yeah.
on it too.
But he was, yeah, I told him I wouldn't share too much of our conversation, but he allowed me to share that much.
We are
He's
okay
re-
with that.
He's ready to move forward.
So just so you all know, with my conversation with Steve over email, he asked how many other places in Smithville are blighted, and I explained that the purpose of blight the purpose of having a blighted area is usually a precursor to one of these types of incentives. So to be considered blighted, you have to have a blight study. It has to be accepted by the board. So currently, the only place that I can think of that has been officially stamped as blighted was the marketplace area, the TIF, prior to any of the buildings going in, such as Price Chopper, Burger King, and all of that. There are no other places within Smithville that have been officially marked as blighted, but that may change in the future. Yes, the old hospital certainly qualifies as blight. When you look at that definition, I'm pretty sure it checks every box. So we're excited about that one. So as far as parameters, I know chapter 100 and 353, you can do so much with them, but at the same time, we'll always accept different proposals and negotiate those down. So as far as let's just focus on the term. Are you all okay with having a max term limit, or is there a certain amount of years? Did you want to match it with the TIF? It sounds like you are a little interested in it. What is your consensus on that? I can go around the board. Bruce, what are your thoughts?
No thoughts yet.
So I think what we can do is just move forward with just the 25 max. I'm getting some nods.
That's what
All
I would
right.
say.
Okay. Do we want to limit? That's another question. Do you want to put any parameters on chapter 100 or 353, or do you want to leave it as all of the max availabilities and then treat each individual proposal as it comes in? Because that is an option as well.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
would too. My anti-competitiveness question earlier went back to what are the other jurisdictions around us doing? And I wouldn't want to put any parameters on it from our standpoint that would make us not competitive or not
Okay.
not even seen in a positive light.
I agree. I think it's important to be consistent, but still treat things individually. I mean, obviously we don't want to scare anyone off, but we don't want to do anything that's not going to benefit the city, and the citizens from that standpoint.
All right.
I agree.
Okay. Carrick?
Yeah, I agree. The only question that I had was what would the benefit be of adding the 80% of income county, that whole deal was, I guess, kind of struck me as something that would be important, especially with the increase in inflation and everything else that's happening right now. How do we encourage companies, businesses that do have a higher level of income potential, I guess? Is there a way to maybe make an advantage if they continually, pay out more than 80% of county average or whatever? That was a big, kind of a big point for me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we can always talk about those in negotiations with developers. And as far as attracting those businesses as well, not every business that comes into town are going to be able to meet that percentage of wage within the county. But as far as attracting those businesses, I believe would be having this toolkit available in general for one, and then that would be marketing on the other side as well. I don't think we could put anything in this that would specifically attract other businesses to Smithville with that specific need.
Very good.
Kind of begs the question, how does it start Smithfield's wages compared to the rest of the county already?
I do not know. We could look that up
Right.
and provide that in our stats for,
No, I've just,
especially with the update in the census. We could
Yeah, I-
definitely provide an update on how Smithville compares to local municipalities.
well, I
based
think
on
it's
those.
something, I think it's something for the city to know rather than us probably, because if you start putting a percentage on it and we're already way over that or way below that, Clay County is a big county. There's a lot of diversity within the parameters within the borders of Clay County.
Absolutely. All right. So I think Carol, are you the only one that I haven't heard from?
Yeah, my only, and I don't know if this is just because I always want to be protective, including that mention of that the project should include desirable public improvements. And I that's just really just that statement is kind of a reminder that, you need to take care of the space around you as well. And not, I don't know. I like the idea of including something like that.
Absolutely. And I think putting that in there under any of these incentives, public improvements coming along with your incentives is always going to be more favorable when negotiating. So we can definitely include that in this as well. All right, since this is an action item, it is sounding like we do not want to put any additional restrictions on chapter 100 or 353. So I will need a motion, a second, and a vote on that. And it looks like Alicia did hop off. So,
Motion.
all right. In a second,
Second.
that was Steve. Okay.
Yep.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Wonderful. We can go on to the next. Oh, I think Alicia's having internet problems again, so we can just move on. The next item is a discussion item on community improvement districts. Again, we have Megan with us. She will be going through some education slides. Feel free to ask questions, ask her to go slower, anything like that. So this is for you guys. So please don't be shy to interrupt and make sure that you understand how these work. Megan, I will hand the floor to you.
All right. So this is my favorite economic development incentive. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, but it is just, oh, perfect. Yes.
Okay. All right. So community improvement districts. What are CIDs? So a CID is a political subdivision with the power to impose a sales tax, a special assessment, or a real property tax to fund public improvements and services. I want to reiterate that a CID will only fund public improvements and services. That's what sets this one apart, and I think that's the reason why I like it so much. They are created by a city or a county following the submission of a petition from a developer. So how is a CID formed? A developer will approach the city with a request. A petition is then filed with the city clerk or the county clerk. A public hearing is held within 45 days of the receipt of that petition. We then do a publication, which is once a week for every two consecutive weeks, excuse me, prior to the week of the hearing. And then also a mailed notice, not less than 15 days prior to the hearing. And then after the hearing, the public hearing, the municipality may adopt an ordinance approving the petition and creating the CID. So within a CID, it has, among other things, a legal description. There is required to be a 5-year plan that states the purpose of the district, what services and improvements that are going to be funded, the estimated costs of everything, the anticipated sources of funds to pay those costs, and then the anticipated term of those sources of funds. They also have to show the proposed revenue source and rate, and then the proposed duration. A CID is now limited to 27 years. Just last year, the legislature put that term limit on CIDs. They used to be able to exist in perpetuity until they were terminated, but they did limit them to 27 years. From the adoption of the ordinance establishing the CID. The city has the ability to extend that if they want to. There's a specific way to set it out that's set out in the CID Act, but just initially it is set for 27 years. So this is where it gets kind of fun. A CID petition is signed by owners of more than 50% by assessed valuation of real estate in the proposed CID, and has to be signed by more than 50% per capita of owners of real estate in the proposed CID. That always gets fun when you have really big ones. Inevitably, something there was one of them always fails there. So hold on. There we go. Okay. Sorry, my computer is just completely messing up today. There it is. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the CID funding sources. CIDs can be funded through special assessments, real property taxes, which must be approved by a majority of the qualified voters within the CID. So the definition of qualified voters is either A, if there's people living within the CID, it's the registered voters, or if there are no registered voters, which is generally just about any commercial retail district, then the owners of the real property within the CID are the qualified voters. There's also a sales tax. Most CIDs that I do use the sales tax option. That also must be approved by the majority of the qualified voters and can be imposed in increments of 1/8 up to 1%. 1% is the maximum. Other sources, fees, rents, and charges for CID property or services, grants, gifts, and donations. And then a CID also has the ability to issue bonds. They are limited to 20 years, but they do have that option.
That would be considered a municipal bond then?
It's actually issued by the CID, but yes, it is limited. CID bonds are limited to the revenues. They are not backed by anything else other than the revenues that are generated by the funding source within the CID. I don't see a lot of just straight community improvement district bonds. We have seen TDD, which we'll talk about TDDs at another meeting, but they are revenue bonds that are solely backed by the revenues generated.
Okay.
So a CID is governed by between 5 to 30 directors, either elected or appointed as approved by the CID. So the qualifications of those, and you can also add to these within the petition. They have to be at least 18 years old, must be an owner of real estate or business operating in the CID, or a registered voter residing in the CID, and compliant with any other qualifications set out in the petition. So also effective August 28th of 2021 for CIDs in which there are no registered voters within the boundary of the CID, at least one director must live within the city that the municipality in which the CID is created, is registered to vote, has no financial interest in any real property or business operating within the CID, and is not a relative within the second consanguinity to a owner of real property or business operating within the CID. So you have a truly what they would call an impartial person that has no interest in the CID on the board. Further, again, the legislature did a lot of overhaul to economic development incentives last year. If the board is elected, the petition must state that one member of the board will be appointed by the governing body of the municipality for a 4-year term to allow the city to have a voice on that as well. So there's also a chit in there to have removal by cause for a 2/3 vote of the board of directors, with a notice of removal given to the directors prior to action. I have had to deal with this before on a CID. They have removed a director for inappropriate conduct, believe it or not. So there's 2 slides of financeable public improvements. You can see here, it's quite the laundry list. A lot of streetscape, parks, lawns, trees, pedestrian shopping malls, convention centers, arenas, aquariums, meeting facilities, sidewalks, streets, alleys, any type of public transportation improvement that you see there. Also utilities, your storm, your water, but only the public portion of that. When you start breaking off into private, then it stops being able to be funded by the CID, and we get really nitty gritty about it when we do that. Additionally, parking lots, garages, other facilities like that, lighting, benches, trash receptacles. If you ever go to City Market has a CID on top of it, and they did all of their trash receptacles. The CID paid for those. And then the catch-all is obviously any other useful, necessary, or desired public improvement, which, I mean, you can do paintings, murals, sculptures, fountains, childcare facilities. Covers just about everything, it seems like. CIDs also have the option to ask to be for a blight study and be found blighted. And then when they're found blighted, you can then pay for costs of demolishing, renovating, and rehabbing structures within the CID. We see that quite a bit, actually. So these are some public services. I have a second slide as well that can be funded with CID funds. So you can see prohibiting or restricting vehicular and pedestrian traffic and vendors on streets. We have CIDs that shut down the streets within the CID to do vendor fairs. Operator contracting for the provision of music, news, childcare, parking facilities, buses, leasing space for sidewalk cafes, providing or contracting for security, personnel, equipment, or facilities for the protection of property and people. Providing or contracting for cleaning, maintenance, and other public services. A lot do snow removal. That's one. You can promote tourism, recreational or cultural activities, and special events. Promoting business activity, development, and retention. Providing refuge collection and disposal services, and then contracting for or conducting economic planning, marketing, or other studies. So like I said, it's a long laundry list of things that are able to be funded with CID, but they're all public improvements. Wi-Fi also, Wi-Fi is another thing, as long as it's public Wi-Fi, can also be used to funded with CID funds, excuse me. So there is a lot though of ongoing compliance required with CIDs. So you have to provide an annual budget that has to be submitted to the governing body of the municipality. There's also an annual report that is required to be filed. So within 120 days after the end of the CID's fiscal year, they must submit their annual report to the clerk and the Missouri Department of Economic Development. And then also there's an annual audit that's required of CIDs. So within 6 months, the CID must submit an audit of their financials to the state auditor. So like within that annual report, you have to give a laundry list of the services that you provided, the revenues that you collected, what you spent your money on during that fiscal year, and then everything, all the dates that coincide with when the CID adopted their budget, submitted their proposed budget to the city, and then also whenever they submitted the annual report to the clerk. So CIDs in Smithville, the Smithville Commons, which we talked about with TIF, also has a layered CID on top of it. It was approved in 2017. The revenues are generated by a 1% sales tax on all sales made within the CID. Obviously, like I said, this is layered with a TIF. So 50% of the sales taxes generated there are captured by the TIF, and we talked about that last time. So the 50% that are uncaptured are able to fund those CID services and projects. So like in the case of Smithville Commons, some of the public improvements that one particularly did, they did some of the road improvements and then also parking lots. But another example though, Blue Springs has a downtown, Blue Springs has a downtown CID that does quite a bit. And then also Independence has a downtown CID that funds a lot of their activities and things like, not awnings, but what is it? The stuff that you put on streetlights, the signs like that. So also Christmas lights, they fund Christmas lights with theirs, which is kind of fun. So, all right, that is all I have. I'll stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how to do it.
I kicked you
There.
off for you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I really love CIDs. They're my favorite.
They're a
I
great
have-
tool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this may seem silly, but so the 1%, sorry, the 1% you said that was generated, so within the district, so is that just within where the CID is?
Yes.
Okay, so like with the Smithville Commons,
It's just Price Chopper and the hardware store and Taco Bell and any businesses. So the boundaries, it's just that little area. And so the
Okay.
CID sales tax just sits on top of that.
okay, that was my question. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yep.
Are they commonly used? CID,
Yes. Oh, yes. Very commonly used.
other jurisdictions around us north of the river using them?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I think, like I said, I think they're favored because It's limited to public improvements. It's not abating taxes. It's just creating, quote unquote, creating a tax where, and then with some of the rules now, the businesses will post, that there's CID sales tax and people can choose not to shop there. And I think that's why a lot of jurisdictions favor these types of things, because it's not taking away, it's generating, it's funding improvements that just better that area. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say any type of improvements frivolous, but I mean, these are directly going into things that are for the public.
So if these funds are used to put down a pavement, like at the marketplace, for example,
Mhm.
who owns the pavement? The city or the entity that the building?
No, the entity owns it, but they're required, like you can't put a gate up, right? They can't limit public access to that area. So if they were to build a parking garage and they were to say, okay, we want to put a CID with this parking garage, but we're going to put, it's going to be gated access. Like, well, that doesn't work. It's not public. It's not accessible by everyone. And so generally when we do these, developers will have a cooperative agreement with the city. So in the case of Smithfield Commons, the city administers the TIF, or excuse me, the CID. They have all of the money. The money is sent from the Department of Revenue to the city. They put it in the account. And then whenever the developer wants to use money to spend on a CID, or excuse me, on a project within the CID, a cost certification is sent to the city. They're required to look at the invoice, make sure it was a public improvement, and then they will distribute money to that. So the city has quite a bit of, at least in Smithville, this is not everywhere. We have some municipalities that want nothing to do with it. They don't want any type of control over CIDs. But at least in Smithville, the city has a lock on where that money is going. So we know it's being spent on those public improvements. But generally, to round myself back to your question, generally in those cooperative agreements, we'll draft that, at least in the cases like public roads, the city will own those, right? But when it comes to like a parking lot in front of Costantino's, they'll say that the developer owns those public improvements, but they're deemed public.
Okay.
Any other questions for Megan? Great. All right. Well, thank you, Megan. We appreciate it. And again, everyone, if any of you have any questions between now and our next meeting, please reach out. If I can't answer your question, I will forward it to Megan and we will be able to get you a response. So what this will look like next. So we'll do the same format at our next meeting. We'll go through CIDs if we want to put any further restrictions on them, what we want that to look like, have that discussion. So be prepared for that. And then also we will then go on to discuss a next incentive. Megan, were you thinking NIDS or special business districts for our next one?
We can do
could
both. Special business districts aren't that hairy. NIDS are, but special districts aren't.
Okay, so we'll be able to do both at our next meeting, neighborhood improvement districts as well as special business districts. So be on the lookout for that. So for new business, did anyone have any new business that they'd like to bring forward? Nope. All right. Well, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, I got Steve for a motion and Callie for a second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great. Thank you guys for coming tonight and we appreciate it and we'll see you next month.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.